nga ba ang CASEWARE Cloud? CASEWARE Cloud is a web service for managing organization and workflows. Its features and apps combine to provide a convenient, centralized solution for management of both your firm and your engagements. Now, before we get started with CASEWARE audit, kailangan siguraduhin muna that your firm administrator completes the necessary prerequisites. So, after ma-complete yung necessary prerequisites, we can now sign in to our firm's cloud site. Before we get started, kailangan na natin mag-sign in. So, enter your email and then the password. Then, click sign in. So, to start the audit engagement, kailangan natin gumawa ng audit engagement file. So, paano tayo gagawa ng audit engagement file? So, from the cloud menu, select audit. Then, select the new button. The audit dialog appears. So, you can now choose your client entity and then enter a meaning for the engagement file. Select a start date and end date for your engagement, as well yung budget hours and amount for your engagement. While naman in the preparer field, enter the name of the preparers and select it from the drop-down list. Then proceed tayo sa reviewer field, enter another staff member's name, then select them from the list to assign them as a reviewer. Lastly, select save. So nakagawa na tayo ng engagement file and then the engagement file will automatically opens in your browser. When you first open the engagement, makikita nyo on the right side is yung pop-up showing the engagement's workflow status. So, it allows other stakeholders to know how far along you are in the engagement process. So, kapag gusto niya nang mag-start working on the engagement, just simply set the workflow status to in progress. Then, click the name of the engagement file. So, you can now view the documents page. So, yung page nito, it displays the documents, data, adjustments, risks, issues, and queries tabs. So, the document page acts as the audit central hub. So, when you first open this page, one document is available. So, para to populate more content in the document page, kailangan muna natin kumpletuhin yung 010 Planning Optimizer Checklist. So, after completing the necessary steps, documents become available within 4 engagement phases, wherein the planning, risk identification and assessment, risk response, and completion. So, how can we plan an engagement? So, kailangan muna natin i-accomplish yung 010 Planning Optimizer. So, yung checklist na to, it consists of questions na makakatulong sa atin to set specific preferences for the audit engagement, such as acceptance or continuance procedures, accounting framework, and the firm composition. So, yung checklist, it also includes a guidance tab wherein it describes the purpose and yung scope of the document as it relates to regulatory standards. So, we must complete the 010 Planning Optimizer to have additional documents and content included in the engagement. So, once na natapos na natin sagutan yung last question, the next step section will appear with a link to the document that you need to complete next. So, after completing yung 010 Planning Optimizer checklist, the next document will be automatically generated based on our responses to the Planning Optimizer questions. So, in this case, the 405 engagement acceptance or continuous was generated. So, in checklist na to, it helped us assess whether yung level of risk is acceptable for the firm and if yung engagement preconditions have been made. So, yung checklist, it also includes a guidance tab that describes yung objective of the engagement, note when using condensed form, and also a note for continuing engagement. So, note that we need to first accomplish the 405 engagement acceptance or continuance checklist before natin ma-access yung next document, which is the 415.1 engagement letter standard ASPE.
A draft version of the engagement letter or the 415.1 engagement letter standard ASPE is generated in the engagement based on your responses in the Planning Optimizer. Note, you must accept the last item in the 405 engagement acceptance or continuance checklist document to have the letter populated in the document page. Para ma-issue natin ng engagement letter sa ating mga client, ito ang mga gagawin natin. Una, buksan natin ang document na 415.2 Client Query Engagement Letter Standard ASPE. Pag nabuksan na natin ito, sa may gawing kanan sa itaas, pindutin natin ang Send. Magbubukas ang Open Query Dialog. Piliin ang query due date at tukuyin natin ang mga contact assigned sa engagement. Next is enter an appropriate email message, then select OK. The 020 Optimizer Initial Client Queries is a checklist that presents suggestions about client inquiries and document requests. Complete this checklist to specify what question or document request you initially require from your client, the expected client response, for example, manually entering the response, uploading a file, or choosing an answer from a list of available options. As you complete the checklist, the 030 Queries Initial Client Queries document populates with content and a link to it displayed in the Next Step section. Proceed to the 030 Client Queries Initial Client Queries document and review the content before you send it to the client. Note, you can make changes to the automatically generated content in the 030 Client Queries Initial Client Queries document if needed. Para ma-send natin ang ating 030 Client Queries document sa ating mga client, ito ang mga gagawin natin. Una, buksan natin ang document na 030 Client Queries Initial Client Queries. Pag nabuksan na natin ito, sa may gawing kanan sa itaas, pindutin ang Send. Magbubukas ang Open Query Dialog. Piliin ang query due date at tukuyin natin ang mga contact assigned sa engagement. Next is enter an appropriate email message, then select OK. Para ma-import ang client data sa pamamagitan ng Excel or CSV file, gawin ang mga sumusunod. Una, kailangan natin pumunta sa data page at select ang import na makikita sa left navigation panel. Pagkatapos, pindutin ang Excel or CSV sa pagpipilian. May lalabas ng import dialog at maaari tayong pumili ng isa upang magamit natin sa pag-import ng ating trial balance. Map the columns in the import file by choosing the field that best matches the data from the import as drop-down menu. Tandaan, kapag ang amount format ay hindi consistent, may dialog box na mag-a-appear para i-notify tayo tungkol sa error. Pagtapos natin mapili ang best matches, select import. Yung imported client data populates in the accounts and group used in the data page. The data section will now consist of import, assign accounts, financial groups, and tax group. After you complete the import, you can re-import the trial balance data at any point in time by going to the data page and selecting import, then one of the available options. Re-import trial balance, re-import from different source, and import from transactions.
So ngayon na nag-grasp na natin ang background ng CASEWARE Cloud, let's get down to business and dive deeper. So CASEWARE Cloud also actually provide templates such as confirmation letters that can be downloaded through a Word file. So you can see, bank confirmation template, loans receivable, loans payable, and other client queries or confirmation letters. So as you can see in this sample, pakita natin na binibigay na ng CASEWARE yung mga necessary information na dapat fill upan. So this actually makes it easier for auditors to work on the much deeper audit activities. Now, dumako na tayo sa ating getting to know stage sa ating mga ino-audit. Sabi nga nila, how can you get to know someone without fully understanding them first? Thus, in a risk-based audit, we have to understand the entity first. So in the risk identification and assessment in the documents tab, makikita na natin ang mga related files nito. So let's navigate them one by one, shall we? So for our first document, we have here coded 500 understanding the entity. So dito sa document na ito, dito natin sasagutin kung ano yung type of entity or sabihin na natin mga general information such as industry type, date of incorporation, accounting standards, and all of those as you can see in the screen. Patatakad din natin yung inspection of key documents and also makita rin natin dito yung mga relevant industry factors kung ano pa nga ba yung mga details na need natin i-specify, areas of concern that needs to be considered in the audit, and takal din natin yung mga laws and regulations na nakapaloob. Bawat industry meron kanya-kanyang laws and regulations yan. Nature of the entity, the responses, and also the accounting policies and financial statement disclosures. And that's it for the understanding the entity document. 507, understanding of those charged with governance and minutes of governance meetings. So because inaalaw niya yung management to be informed regarding significant matters and the chance to respond to the auditor about these matters and to take action, which is why the minutes of the meeting is also included. So these are the necessary information for that kind of person. Person interviewed, by whom and select date, governance structures, fraud. What, in management opinions, are the financial statement areas susceptible to fraud or any specific fraud risk? Kung natapos lahat yan, then we could also click this right here and add an issue. Just type whatever dun sa information na ginather natin during the audit procedures. Next is we're going to the 645.1, the litigation, claims, and non-compliance. In this portion of the documentation method, you can see that you have two options, either full or memo. So memo, if the litigation, claims, or non-compliance is not really that significant, and you can just freely type in something that addresses those issues. Or if not, you could also choose full. Then makikita natin dito na napaka-specific ng mga details na hinihingi nila, such as we need to identify it, make inquiries of the management, communications, accuracy evaluation, etc. And for the conclusion, based on professional judgment, the audit evidence obtained is sufficient and we just have to answer that. Next, if it's really so serious and full ang napili natin, magkakaroon tayo ng letter to law firm. This is also another template that we could use as a reference if ever na magkaroon tayo ng mga ino-audit nating company na nagsasuffer from litigation.
Okay, going further as to the control of our CASEWARE Cloud audit software, we are now heading to the setting that we can see at the lower button of our screen, and you will see the organization, the email, security, customization, system, working papers, review compliance, tax, audit, and the analytics. And on this segment, we'll be more focused under the security. And under the security, you will see the role permission, wherein you will see the segregation of duties that only the assigned personnel are will able to access all the content respectively. Then under the password setting, you can also set a password that to have a strength and the authentication and session management, wherein it includes the two-way factor authentication, like you will require a two-factor authentication for all the staff or for all the contacts that have the access for the software, like session management. And so remember user on sign-in, setting the hours to remember users value. Next is for the customization. So in this customization, we have the views management that controls all the files, the stuff, the contacts that who will only have the access. Like here, you will see here the predefined default for staff and default for contacts. Then next is the position. You will also have the chance to select the staff position that are relevant to our or to your organization. So you will freely access here, like you can just click and then click whether it is relevant or not relevant to your organization. Then under this tag management, links management, that links this risk space. Of course, we have additional risk involved in our software, that whether, like for example, if you are not being able to maximize or delegate the segregation of duties properly, you will be having some chaos or some conflicts as to the regards of these features of our software. Like here in the manage workflows, you will be only assigning, like for example, for other clients, you will assign people or person, staff, to create your workflow.
So now we're going past the understanding the entity stage. Ngayon, itatakil na natin ang kanilang mga risk and estimates, going here firstly at the pervasive risk. Let's take a look at this 506, identifying fraud risk. So, dito natin mapag-uusapan yung professional skepticism, questionable documents, and response to inquiries. Management communication, knowledge of fraud, anything here that could identify the fraud risk of the company, of course. Next is the 508 assessment of business and fraud risk, which is a worksheet. So, as we drop down here, makikita natin na medyo predetermined na and expected na yung mga common na business and fraud risk ng company. And you could just check everything that applies to that company na ino-audit natin. Marami dito. As we drop down, you could just read it. Here, deteriorating industry conditions, deteriorating financial conditions of the company, and its business and fraud risk factors, possible management responses, and your response and comments as the auditor. Dito naman natin itatakal yung control environment ng company. If we have documented the understanding of the entity's governance, syempre mahalaga rin naman ang documentation sa ating pag-audit because dito tayo makakapaggawa ng audit trails. Pervasive control activities, summary of findings. So now we've come past the pervasive risk portion, we will now go to the estimates portion. Firstly, in the prior year estimates, the outcome of prior period accounting estimates. So this portion already tackles the nitty-gritty detailed parts of the audit, which also involves numbers. So, dito natin ilalagay yung mga accounting estimates ng company. So for example, in this type of estimate, let's give an example. Allowance for doubtful accounts. Random numbers. CASEWARE will automatically compute the amount of difference and the percentage of variance. So, dito, mailalagay natin yung explanation of variance according to the information that we've gathered so far. Any indication of management bias, yes or no. And also here, as an auditor, we should describe implications for current period estimates. And lastly, dito sa document na to, makita natin yung audit conclusions based on professional judgment. If you have already reviewed the outcome of those accounting estimates, you can just put yes and you're done. Going back to the Documents tab, pupunta naman tayo sa Current Year Estimates. So unlike the prior year estimates, current year estimates documents are really so specific because sa prior year estimates wala tayong magagawa kundi balikan lamang ang mga records nito. But here we have the chance to put the findings if the procedure is successfully completed. And its nature, its FS area if it's in balance sheet or income statements, if it's material or could be material, complex, and financial statements assertions, affected. Completeness, existence, allocation or valuation, and presentation. I-describe din natin yung mga inherent risk factors, assess inherent risk, significant risk, etc. So, makikita natin dito ang different kinds of nature of estimates. Then, there's notes here, part B. And the part C and D, which is where we understand how estimates are made, na mapupuntahan din natin dito. So for our part C and D of understanding accounting estimates and related disclosures, dito natin makikita how less complex estimates are made. So although same lang siya ng information na hinihingi, just as in A, B, and E, mas makikita natin dito na yung kanilang mga accounts are segregated, unlike doon na sama-sama sila sa isang table. After navigating all this and masagutan na siya, data use, data integrity, pupunta ulit tayo sa documents to tackle the process documentation. So, itong apat na ito, although different sila ng accounts, same lang sila ng estimates, magkaiba lang sila ng heading. As you can see here, in the process documentation of revenues, receivable, and receipts, sasagutan natin dito yung mga key people na magpo-process ng documents for that related matters. IT system used, initiation, authorization, and all that. And to compare and to prove my point, we will see now the purchases, payables, and payments, which is just the same.
Let us now proceed with the materiality under the risk identification and assessment. Code 419, Possible Misstatements in Qualitative Disclosures, is used to identify the key audit risks of the engagement. Ito yung field kung saan pwede mong i-describe yung nature of any qualitative disclosures that could be material to users of the financial statements. Pwedeng ilagay mo ng significant business combination and disclosures na related sa nature ng entity. Pwede kang mag-add ng row by simply clicking this and delete a row by clicking the cross mark. Kapag yari ka na sa pag-i-input ng mga qualitative disclosures, you can now click this para sa next step. Code 420, Materiality, is used to document kung sino yung mga principal users, i-calculate yung overall materiality and performance materiality, as well as yung amount ng trivial misstatement, and if needed pa ba, ang materiality and performance materiality in any specific circumstances. And then, sagutan lang yung questions about revision ng materiality. This is the field for principal users of the financial statements and yung mga factors na need nating i-consider. Overall materiality. Dito may default option na for the basis of overall materiality. We can choose between net income or revenue, but if yung basis natin is wala dun sa default options, we can add naman. For example, we can type total assets as the basis, then input yung amount at saka yung benchmark na 2%, and it will automatically compute the possible materiality. Sa performance materiality naman, magre-reflect na yung na-compute natin kanina, then input lang uli yung benchmark na 75%, and mako-compute na yung possible materiality. Yung amount na nasa-set for materiality has a large impact on how the engagement is performed. Isa siya sa key tools na ginagamit ng auditors to plan their audit and response sa risks. So, proceed na tayo sa Code 425 Risk Assessment page. So, this is an import hub or summary ng mga engagement and where you will plan most kung paano ka magre-respond sa mga identified risks. You can use this to document your assessment sa risk levels ng financial statement areas based sa information na nag-gather mo for both financial and from the risk identification and assessment phase documents. Yung may M na symbol, meaning nag-exceed siya sa materiality, and makakatulong to para mas mag-guide tayo sa planning ng audit response. Code 605, Responding to Risk at the Financial Statement Level. Ito yung standard checklist on responding to risk sa financial statement level. May questions na answerable by low, medium, or high. Meron ding completed with no exceptions or complete with exceptions. At meron ding yes or no. May mga field din where you can put a response or comment. Then, click yung next step for the Code 430, Team Planning Discussions and Overall Audit Strategy. And Code 450 for Time Budget for this engagement. We can now proceed sa Risk Response phase. Dito merong Journal Entries Analysis and Risk Response. Code 670, Use of journal entries, is used to determine whether material misstatements due to fraud or error have occurred from the use of inappropriate, fictitious, or unauthorized journal entries. Yung mga question dito ay answerable by completed with no exception or completed with exception. About sa preparation, completeness, existence, inquiry, analysis, identified unusual or inappropriate journal entries, investigations, and audit conclusions. Then, proceed na sa next step, AI20, Data Completeness. Ito yung table para mas mabilis natin ma-verify kung yung nasa trial balance ba ay nag-a-agree sa totals from the imported transactions. Areas with zero difference column indicates that there are no issues. If there is a difference, for example, is yung short-term investments, there is a difference of 144,836.95 pesos, which indicates na yung trial balance at supporting transactions ay hindi tugma. AI30, Influencers for Analytics Insights. Influencers, ito yung mga accounts na gusto mong bigyan ng emphasis sa risk analysis. And then, AI40, Analytics Insights. Dito naman, dadalhin ka niya sa Analytics AI functionality. So, let us now proceed sa risk response. Code 630, Summary of External Confirmations. It is used to summarize the external confirmation procedures. We can see the audit areas na pwede tayong gumamit ng confirmation. And dito naman sa field na to, ilalagay what type of confirmation ang ginamit and yung brief summary lang. Code 635 Accounting Estimates Further Audit Procedures Worksheet. Dito makikita natin yung accounting estimate and then yung checklist para sa testing approaches na ginagamit sa procedure. Then, input yung summary ng exceptions or difficulties na na-encounter natin sa test of controls, overall evaluation and presentation, then yung question for audit conclusion. Code 640, Client Queries, Records and Documents. This query document is similar lang sa client queries, initial client queries, except this document is used to drive the completion of the risk response phase. Code 650, Subsequent Events. Need lang natin mamili sa full or memo na options if anong documentation method yung ginamit natin to complete subsequent events requirements. Code 680 ASPE Supplementary Audit Procedures. Ginagamit to para makakuha ng necessary audit evidence relating to the first-time adoption of accounting standards for private enterprises, ASPE, financial instruments and employee future benefits in accordance with ASPE. It consists of 96 questions na pwedeng sagutin ng yes or no, meron ding yes or not applicable, and may mga questions din na answerable by completed with no exceptions or completed with exceptions. And sa bottom part, makikita natin yung field kung saan pwede natin ilagay yung conclusion.
So, to generate a sample using a systematic method, first, on the Transaction tab, in the Data page, select Sample Selection. Then, select the systematic method. And third, enter the desired sample size. So you can enter a value up to 1000. The fixed periodic interval is calculated by dividing the population size by the sample size. So fourth, optionally, enter a high amount threshold if you want to include certain high amounts in the sample selection result using the monetary method. First is enter the sample size. You can enter a value up to 1000. Then, optionally enter a high amount threshold if you want to include certain high amounts in the sample selection result. For example, if you enter a high amount threshold of 500, then transactions that are greater than or equal to 500 to a maximum of 1000 transactions are excluded from the population and added to the sample selection result. Then, to get the result, select Generate. Select the manual method. And in the list of transactions, select the checkbox for each transaction you want to include in the sample. So, you can select the posting date or amount column to sort the list by posting date or amount as you make your selection. An arrow displays next to the column to the name. The list is sorted ascendingly or descendingly. So note that your selections are not cleared if you sort it. So to clear your selections, select the Clear Selection button. So last is exporting the samples so that we can get the result of the sampling selection that we have made. So to export a sample, after we generate a data sample, we can export the sample to CSV file or copy it to clipboard. So first, generate a sample that we have made, and second is select the export button. That's all. We have now the sampling selection.
Next up is the analytical review para ma-identify natin yung relationship and mga unusual transactions, amounts, ratios, or trends na posibleng mag-require ng audit response. To start, pwede natin i-search yung document number or yung unique identifier sa search box. So we can type here 501 or preliminary analytical procedures. Pindutin lang natin yung document. The Procedures tab contains the analytical procedures checklist na i-fill out natin para sa engagement. Then, makikita natin dito yung economic industry and trends, mga changes in operations. So, let's type the trends and changes na na-observe natin. Pwede rin tayo dito mag-add ng mga reviews or comments para may mga reference tayo for the analytical review. Ito yung magiging guide natin para sa additional information na nanote natin dito sa audit. Then, we will just fill out the checklist in accordance with the relevant information available from the entity at yung mga facts na na-identify natin during assessment. We can then complete the table for the summary of matters identified, management responses, and audit implications and possible responses. Kung meron ng mga unexpected or unusual relationships na pwedeng maging indication ng material misstatement due to fraud, i-click lang natin yung yes. Then, another item will pop up. Ito rin yung maganda dito sa CASEWARE Cloud. May mga additional information siya na nagpa-pop up depending on our answers sa mga unang questions. So, na-maximize niya yung page based na rin sa need and applicability ng mga items na kailangan sa engagement. So, CASEWARE Cloud also has an analysis tab. Dito natin makikita yung mga graphs representing yung data na meron sa financial statement na na-import natin sa software. This document is linked to data throughout the engagement, kaya mas madaling magkaroon ng visual comparison ng data and discover trends and patterns using predefined analytics. Meron din siyang filter switches para ma-display or mapili lang natin kung ano yung mga analysis, graphs, or widget na gusto natin mag-appear sa screen natin. So, let's move on to the completion phase. Balik lang tayo dito sa Document tab. Then, click natin yung completion on the left side of our screen. Then, as an auditor, we need to have an overall review of the financial statement at the end of our audit to assess whether they are consistent with our understanding of the entity. So, if there are no additional risks or issues identified, we just have to click Completed. Then, makikita rin natin dito kung sino yung mga nag-review or nag-prepare ng document since may automatic sign-off sa bawat document sa engagement. Then, we can go to Analysis tab where we can browse the graphs and summary of accounts relationship, ratio, and trend. We can further use the filter command to display the desired graphs. Next is the summary of identified misstatements sa worksheet. So, CASEWARE automatically presents the objective of completing the document as we can see here. We can also modify the name of the document and specify the roles and identify the staffs who are responsible for reviewing and preparing the document. As we browse through the page, we will see the summary of the omitted disclosures and misstatements found during the audit, including the related information. At the end of the document, makikita rin natin yung evaluation and conclusion regarding the omission and misstatements as well as the sign-off ng auditor para sa document na to. So for the summary of identified misstatements in terms of procedures, we see here the checklist for revisions made, additional work done regarding the materiality, misstatements, and communication to the management and those charged with the governance, including the suggested corrections and changes in the financial statement to account for the uncorrected misstatements. So, i-fill out lang natin to according sa mga materiality, risk assessment, risk response, and additional audit work na ginawa natin. Sa pinakadulo, makikita rin natin yung conclusion and basis for conclusion na magiging basis ng independent auditor's report by the end of the engagement. Add lang rin natin dito yung mga comments and reviews as necessary. Then we can proceed to the next step, which is the general financial statement presentation. This portion of the audit provides a checklist regarding the compliance and presentation of the financial statements. So, CASEWARE has an embedded document map that helps the auditor to easily navigate through a lengthy document checklist, gaya na lang dito sa general financial statement presentation. So, pwede natin yung i-utilize. Na-address kasi sa section na to yung mga common standards and rules for the proper classification and presentation of the financial statements, pati na rin yung required disclosures na dapat meron sa company. Since listed na yung mga questions and items na required for the FS presentation, malilesen yung possibility na may mga miss out na information si auditor na pwedeng maka-apekto sa audit opinion niya. Kaya, makatutulong tong si CASEWARE Cloud para mas ma-complete yung auditor's engagement. So, i-fill out lang natin tong checklist. If hindi applicable sa client yung mga items dito sa document, i-click lang natin yung no and mag-add tayo ng comment or reason kung bakit no yung sagot natin. And then, i-hide na ni CASEWARE yung mga related questions about doon para hindi na maging magulo yung checklist natin.
We are now on documentation of audit issues. From the title itself, ito na yung part na gagawa tayo ng work papers para sa mga decisions sa key audit matter, findings at matters for future consideration gamit ulit si CASEWARE Cloud. So, click lang natin ito. Then, as you can notice, we have here 6 drop-down menus. Then, isa-isahin natin. So, sa notes, instructions lang yan. Then, notes on significant audit decisions. Then, click it. Click. We can see a table of description of significant audit matter, proposed resolution, and conclusion reached. So, pwedeng significant matters natin is yung application of significant accounting policies, proposed adjustments to financial statements, and estimates prepared by management. So, kung maaalala natin, hirap mag-collect si Forever Manufacturing. So, pwede natin ilagay dito yun, which is adjustment to their allowance for doubtful accounts. Then, our proposed resolution is their journal entry. Then, as we can remember, the conclusions reached there is the management did not accept what we have suggested. So next, do any of the items above need to be reported to those charged with governance? Then we have here a yes or no. Kapag in-click natin yung yes, meron tayong drop-down for response and comments. Then, key audit matters. We have here description of key audit matters, significance, and matters addressed in the audit. So, parehas lang siya ng ginawa natin dito sa notes on significant audit decisions. Matters for future consideration. So, when it comes to matters for future consideration, pwede natin include dito yung mga difficulties encountered, revisions in internal control, and changes in business or fraud risk. So, kung natatandaan nyo pa si Forever Manufacturing, meron siyang mga business risk na kinakaharap, which is yung presence ng sobrang daming competitors. Dito, pwede natin siyang ilagay. So, the advantage of using this software is that first-time auditors will not be lost and guided because yung CASEWARE Cloud itself provide a series of checklists to be followed. Let's move to audit conclusion. So, we can select full or memo. So, in some cases, particularly in small audit firms, it may be more efficient to create a memo document, while it is recommended to use full for large audits. So, we can select full in our audit for Forever Manufacturing. Then full. So, as we can see, this is the difference between full, whereas if we have only check memo, we only have response and comment. So, to facilitate Forever Manufacturing Company, we have full audit. We have here preliminary activities, which is composed of documentations from acceptance and continuance of engagement up to for listed entities an independence letter. So, this is all about yes or no, yes or no. Similar to planning and risk assessment, it is also answerable by yes or no. So, as CASEWARE Cloud provides us auditor and audit checklist. This will guide us to check and see if we are missing out on some working papers or some prior documentation. Being in the completion stage, these steps determine if our documents are complete, which is very important on our part. So, before clicking yes or no, we, auditor, must check if those documents or activities have been gathered or performed. And to financial statement optimizer. So, click lang natin. There are a series of questions like, does your audit report cover 2 years of financial information? Would you like to use a condensed statement of income and retained earnings, which is answerable by yes or no. So, ano nga ba yung possible na gamit ng mga questions na ito? So, maggamit natin yung mga answers natin dito sa ating financial statement optimizer sa ating data sa financial statement proper, especially those terminologies. So, lagyan lang natin ang data. Statement of financial position in business balance sheet. So, let's click proceed to 110 financial statements. So, dito magre-reflect lahat ng nilagay natin sa financial statement optimizer. So, this is the end product of our full audit process. It contains the cover page, table of contents, independent auditor's report, which is the template, statement of financial position, statement of income and retained earnings, statement of cash flow, statement of analysis, and graphs and notes to financial statements. So the good thing about this software or CASEWARE Cloud is that it has a corresponding analysis graph that is beneficial to the conduct of our audit, especially when we are doing our analytical procedures. To conclude our demonstration, I would like to give some insights to CASEWARE audit software. When doing the audit for the first time, this is very useful and helpful because it covers the whole audit process. It contains lists and checklists of the audit activities in accordance with the standards. And the most challenging part in using this software for the first time is the navigation between drop-downs. All in all, CASEWARE Cloud is beneficial, especially in conducting the whole process of the audit.